Your nation, your news. One American News Network.
Welcome back to the Panel's Choice. Here we allow each panel member to pick a topic from this week that they feel is important to discuss. We'll start with Preston's pick. Contrasting this week's RNC convention, here's some of Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's speech from the DNC convention.
A movement striving to recognize and repair the wounds of racial injustice, colonization, misogyny, and homophobia, and to propose and build reimagined systems of immigration and foreign policy that turn away from the violence and xenophobia of our past.
All right, Preston, why'd you pick this?
Well, I think it just shows how disconnected from reality some members of Congress are. There's a cult-like fanaticism, out of touch, delusionality to the word salad that she just threw together in a very short amount of time. It actually quite honestly boggles the mind. According to a Pew study, the number one issue Republicans, Democrats care about this fall is the economy and health care. All the way down at 11 is climate change and 10 is economic inequality. Republican voters care about the economy and law and order, and Democratic voters care about the coronavirus and health care. So just this word salad of meaningless gobbledygook, I think just shows you kind of the state of play and what's on the line for business owners this fall.
All right, Malik, what are your thoughts?
So I think that there is, AOC is who she is. I think that there's been a divide for quite some time now. If you look at just the nature of our politics, I don't think that I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to be concerned about COVID, because that's really a big thing. But the problem is that what's happening with COVID has impacted the country. So we have to still look at that. But the idea of, things like climate change and stuff like that, that's just not going to hit it this election cycle.
Amisha, do you think she missed the mark?
No, I think that she hit it spot on, and this is the first time I've ever heard a millennial actually use gobbledygook in a sentence, so that was kind of cool too. But right now, I have family in New Orleans. I have family across the Gulf Coast. When I think about the rise of and the intensity of what we're seeing with natural disasters, we can't not talk about what's happening with our climate. We can't not talk about climate energy. We cannot not talk about what we're watching see happen to our environment. Flint victims just got their court proceedings and their checks now. Like, this just happened, and the Flint crisis happened years ago. I think that what we're seeing is an AOC and a Democratic Party that is taking on issues that actually matter to people. Yes, the economy is always going to be number one, whether we're in a good economy or a bad one. That's what people care about. We know that. But in addition to that, what also affects the economy? Green energy jobs. So she's able to connect, I think, the dots where we see many people not able to do the same thing.
All right, Marie.
I still think she missed the mark a little, because she talks about green energy jobs, and then you look at how many green energy companies went out of business and took millions of dollars from the government and went bankrupt. So yes, there might be green energy jobs, but at what cost? Is it going to be the cost of the American people, the cost of American taxpayers, or there's going to be true green energy jobs where the American people are not supporting the green energy, but the market itself?
All right.
Can I push back really quick?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, my whole issue with AOC in this clip, and I think a lot of business owners watching this election cycle, is that we all feel like we're on this whirlwind being whiplashed by narcissistic personalities who are using virtue signaling to profit. And there's a new study out from the American Psychological Association called Signaling Virtuous Victimhood as Indicators of Dark Triad Personalities, just released by Eric Oke and Yi Qian, and it says that not all victim signals are accurate. Specifically says that acceptance of all virtuous victim signals as genuine can enable and reward fraudulent claims, particularly those with antisocial personality traits. And so I think that's what people on the right, business owners, are concerned about, is we have a whole party that's given into this profiting from virtue signaling. And so that clip of AOC just kind of running on a tirade of word salad really kind of cuts against the perhaps the genuineness of her message.
How does pointing out a lot of what we see with a rising anti-Semitism, the civil rights organizations across the country have pointed that out. We've watched even people within the Trump White House point this out as well when we're looking at a lot of the victims and a lot of the rise in the terrorism against this specific group. AOC pointed that out very strongly. I think that it's easy to say word salad, but the things that she labeled, the things that she mentioned are things that people are going through in this country every single day.
All right, I'm sorry, we got to move on. Good point, though. Next up, we have Malik's pick. Here's political commentator Keith Boykin talking about how the Trump administration has actually not helped the black community.
He's been president for almost 4 years now, and he's never made a single visit to a black community to attend a black event. How the hell do you say you're making a serious effort to reach black people when you haven't even gone to a black community? For God's sake, he hasn't even gone to the black community in Washington, D.C. He hasn't gone to the black community in New York, in Harlem, or in Brooklyn, where he lived. He has not made any serious effort to reach black people.
This was an interesting pick. I was a little surprised when I got your video. Tell us about it.
So what you heard from Keith there is the same thing that we hear a lot when we're talking about what has Trump done or any progress made on the black community. What Keith was talking about is symbolism, showing up for it, and so that's showing up at a church, showing up at a community center. All of those things are important for an optics point of view, but notice he didn't say anything about policy, and that's what I wanted to focus on, because if you compare what the Trump administration has done policy-wise to the Obama administration, and most people don't realize that in 2016, around the end of 2016, the Obama administration published what he thought were progress made in the black community. And if you compare what Trump has done in these now 3-4 years in office, in comparison to Barack Obama, he's actually done more. It doesn't mean that Trump is the best black president. I don't agree with anything like that. The best president for black people. But it does push back on this notion that somehow the symbolism matters more than policy.
Well, I disagree with that totally, because if you're someone who is propagating consistently that you're the best president for black people, and you're someone who really cares about the black community, yet the only people, he sends black people to the black community. Jerron Smith is a good friend of mine. He's obviously on the right. He's someone who becomes the face of the Trump administration when he's working on black issues. But for the president himself not to go to the black community, not to have those conversations, not to be a part of that policy making on the ground, people are not hearing from him personally, and I think that does make a difference. To George W. Bush's credit, even as a Republican, he was able to do that. We have not seen President Trump do it at all.
Marie?
I agree with Malik. Sometimes it's just, I mean, I work with people in politics and activism, and we have groups of people who show up, their pictures are taken, and they do nothing. And then you have groups of people who work hard, who do all the work in the background. You don't know their names, you don't know who they are, but they get the job done. So I agree with Malik. Sometimes just showing your face is not enough. We've had a lot of politicians who will show up, and we have a lot of politicians show up every 4 years in the black community, promise everything to the black community. Once they get elected, once they get reelected, you don't hear anything. So what's the use of going somewhere if you don't have the policy to back it up?
Right. No pressure, Preston, but you are the only white guy on the panel.
Well, I think just to the point of the panelists, according to a Zogby poll that just came out, that has Trump's best approval rating on record with 901 likelies with a 3.3% margin of error. He's polling at 36% approval rating with African Americans. And so the problem for Democrats is, can they win any elections at a national level anymore if Republicans are going to start drawing a third of the African American electorate?
Yeah, it will be interesting to see how that
It won't be 30% though. It won't be 30% though.
Even if it's 15%, if it's
votes.
20%, Democrats can't win national elections anymore. So that's a real problem that they're going to have to contend with.
Well, the biggest threat is actually Trump shaking the ballot box by removing all of these mailboxes in.
Oh, you mean the ones that were approved underneath the Obama administration?
They're saying that there's massive fraud, even though he consistently uses mail voting. That is the issue.
The Spygate
we have a president who is absolutely fine.
All right, I'm going to go to Marie's pick. According to the Anti-Defamation League, the U.S. is still experiencing a record high number of anti-Semitic incidents. Here's a rabbi's emotional plea to the public following last year's deadly attacks at a synagogue in Poway.